I feel like I'm gonna end up doing something to this face. Like, it's gonna break away from the pug and Walrus thing. I'll probably have to do a little bit more of a concept, a reference dig. Maybe I could just take something from, like, here. Maybe some carapace might help. I think the back here could be like a carapace. Oh. This might make sense with stuff that's going on here. So there's some carapace coming down here too. I'm starting to get rid of all of the smooth spots. Like, this is kind of what you want, because when everything's so smooth, it kind of, I feel like sometimes it is what makes it so dull. It's like, yeah, you want a bit of just some variety to the surface of your sculpt, you know? So, you know, I keep going back and forth, like, you know, sculpt it out and then sculpt it in, sculpt it out and sculpt it in. This is how you get just some variety to the surface as a whole there. And at this point now, like, I'm starting to feel like, just for the sake of, like, the bust, I think I'm gonna turn this into something that should look like it's humanoid. I'm gonna pull these, I'm just gonna quickly mask this so I don't mess this up at all. I'm gonna pull these out so it looks like it should have shoulders. So, you know, that way it feels like a bust. Because right now it's starting to look like he's a fish. Let's put some. There you go. And let's just fake some kind of shoulder muscles. My anatomy is not great at times, so I'm just roughing things in. There you go. Some kind of really, really muscular coral sea lion thing. But yeah, so this is a point where I feel like I should start maybe getting into the next subdivision of things. As long as everything's roughly where you want it to be, I would advise bringing this up one more subdivision Dynamesh first, and then we could just work from there. So with my clay brush active, I'm gonna first tackle this face again. I think we'll go over these creases again, and I'm going to stick with my clay brush for now. And let's just get these in. And I remember we were doing the sea lion's eyes, remember? Along these lines, remember? So it's kind of like this. I remember I had this shape here coming down here, so I wanted that. And now what I do is I tend to sculpt, not in a straight line. So for example here, I don't go like that because it doesn't look good. I tend to sculpt, like it's almost like shading along the direction I want. So sometimes, I do it in reverse. So it's, like you could put down like that, right? Really bring it down. And then you could sculpt it back in. It's just about building. And every so often, you might get like, you can get your Damien standard, which comes with Zbrush. You just add in stuff like that, and then use your clay build up. You just have to bring these forms back down a bit again. The truth is like I used to just use one brush for a lot of things, and honestly, what you should do is you should actually be mixing your brushes. Like I think I generally use the clay brush for just lumpy kind of muscle buildup. It works pretty well most of the time, I find. And then sometimes I smooth it down. Like sometimes it's better to smooth some down, because you kind of want to flatten out without breaking everything, and you just go over it again. And sometimes even just inflating it brings it closer together. You can even pinch, but I like inflate. I find that it adds a lot to the form usually. Now it's like I feel like I've brought out too much, so you could use the move brush and bring it in. Just bring it all back to something that you like. I kind of liked it when this was kind of coming out more like that. Let's sort out this nose. I wanted something like this for the nose, where I remember where the crevice goes in. So let's do that. Let's work on that. This looks like it kind of like ramps into the middle, like that. Bring this up. And I'm just gonna add that little bit of like edging here. So sculpt that down a bit. I think this could go all the way down into the middle like that. And it's still really rough, obviously. Like we haven't got enough subdivisions to go into detail with that section, but we just want to rough it all out, really. Let's carry on with the face now. I really want to accentuate things, so I'm going to bring this back down. And let's like take down this, and let's just start building the softer forms of things. Let's just keep playing with this. Oop, didn't want to connect. Now I don't like how high this brow section is looking like. It's kind of looking a bit too weird. So I'm going to, I'm just gonna connect that, bring it down here instead. So now there's a brow section here. And I'm going to tweak this a bit. I kind of want to bring this nose out like that. So it's like a little button nose of some sort. Let's continue. How this looks. How the side profile. I do have a side profile. Do we want wrinkles? We could do wrinkles along here. Yeah, I could do the wrinkle section now. Let's do that. So I'm gonna have to put my Z intensity up again. Sometimes to really accentuate, you need to just pull out the Damien standard and just go in, just smooth it out, go in, and smooth it out, and then just go over it again, the clay brush build up. Just keep going with it. Let's think about this. It's kind of fatty in that section DI, so I'm just gonna add this to it. Just kind of beef that up together. Oh, take the standard. Just keep climbing into it. Yeah. And again, inflate really helps with these things. It brings them together, kind of brings this back together as a whole. And the wrinkles are a bit too even, and I'm going to pull this a bit, this maybe. This is a bit too flat now. Going from top down, just looks boxy. So I'm trying to think of maybe I could do a little bit more to fix that profile. And put it into perspective, just see how it looks in perspective as well. Yeah. So it's kind of cool, right? We've got some nice ideas going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to these pieces and keep polishing that now. Let's just pull out the clay brush. Let's go back to these things and let's just play around with it. So I like how this kind of comes out and then it kind of comes back on itself. So what I want to do is I actually want to do like this thing where I sculpt on the inside like that. Ooh, and isolate that. Isolation is the solo thing here. I just have a hotkey for that. I'm just gonna move this out as well. So just a bit more range and the reach of this thing that kind of reaches backwards. Just gonna sculpt again and just carry on desculpting. Let's just keep playing around with this edge. And at some point I'm actually going to just inflate this as well. See, round it out a bit. Let's just keep thinking about what we could do with how it connects as well. Maybe this could actually come down here a bit. So it really looks like it's dug in there, you know. Could that be good? I think I overdid with that part there. Oh, I just realized I should be. Yeah, I didn't have mirror on. I think this should come down a bit. No, maybe this should come up. Yeah, I think that actually looks better. Yeah, I kind of like that random twist and flow. It kind of reminds you of this stuff. So we could go with that. Let's go another resolution higher and start getting some really fine details on some of this. Pull this forward like that. Pull this further back. I kind of want this to come out a bit more as well. Maybe not the top part there, maybe like the midsection should kind of range this way a bit more. So it kind of flows with this a bit. That's kind of what I want. Not so much that it's like stuck to it, I want to pull that out a bit. Yeah, there you go. Feels a lot more psychedelic and just weird. Perfect. Let's bring this to the next subdivision. Oh. There we go. Now it's like just sculpt. This is where it starts to get a little more fun because everything's already down, all the difficult parts are kind of out of the way. So it's just sculpting until you see something nice now, really. So I got this idea where everything kind of just bends in and out of itself, so might be okay. It's gonna be kind of lumpy, but almost like carapace. I think this is gonna like. You can see it's kind of breaking there because I've got back face mask on. I have it off, so it's actually trying to sculpt on the other side of this geometry, so it's too thin at the moment. That's okay, I'll look at what I have now. I'll keep moving subdivisions to basically make sure it's got enough density that it won't sculpt to the other side as easily. I almost feel like there should be something here to kind of help roll into that harsh cut. I'm wondering if I could do an extract. So I extract, accept, Dynamesh, just bring that here. I feel like I could do something with this. So, bring this resolution up, this down a bit. I feel like there could be something here. Yeah, something's on the way. I kind of did something. Might be overkill, if I can be honest. No, yeah, that helped. That did help. That kind of helped frame everything else. It's almost like a step. So all of this feels like a crown now, almost. So I did more of a reference dig, and I've just been looking for stuff with a lot of wrinkles in it. I'm hoping to apply a lot of this to what we have, and hopefully we get a desirable look from it all. We kind of looked around for really different things. We'll see what we can get out of it. Kind of just implement a little bit this cat look, actually. I think this will work really well with this. Maybe stuff like this might work well with it. Let's try and implement that. So I'm about to go over some of the stuff I've actually done already, which is fine. Just, I'm gonna try and incorporate a bit, get the Damien standard out. Just, just slowly cut into this a bit. You can smooth it out. And I think generally with the pug wrinkles I had before, I'm going to try and break a little bit of it, but still maintain some of it. I want some of this weird scrunched face kind of look to it all. So I think this one kind of cuts into it like this. I think actually I'm just going to smooth this down so I can just get into this way. So we've got the big eyelid thing here. I want something that does that same kind of cut downwards like this. Just smooth it a bit, remesh it, and just keep going with it. So I think this is a good way to start. And after you've defined it a bit, get the clay brush and just kind of build up on it. I think a general rule of this is that if you treat your wrinkles kind of like you did with everything else, it's really just the same thing, but just one step deeper into the detail. Like essentially I was mentioning before that there's this thing about having your largest forms where it needs to read from a distance, and then there's a secondary detail which is kind of the stuff I'm doing now, and then there is a final a micro detail which is essentially things like pores and skin textures and all that kind of stuff, like veins and so forth. Maybe a bit more. Let's just kind of build this wrinkle crease thing here. This down a bit as well. Build that back up. Just make this a bit thicker here. Make sure it connects. Ooh. Essentially, this is like how I would go about doing my creases. It's really just this. Like you use your Damien standard to really accentuate the crease itself, and then you use your clay buildup to kind of get the lumpiness in there, so it feels a little more organic. You don't have to use the clay brush. You could use whatever brush you're comfortable with, but this is the process I would go through with everything. I just find the clay brush always gives me a much nicer, more characteristic kind of build up. See, this needs a little bit more thickness there. I guess we have the big eyelid. I want some of this in here now. Let's get this and draw this in as well. Just down like that, because it kind of goes around the mouth and stuff like that as well. And this is a perfect moment where for me to start building up that there as well. Just drop the size a bit. Alt key is not registering. And honestly, this is kind of I'm already going a bit too much into detail at this stage, because what we really want to do is we want to get to a point where we deactivate Dynamesh. And with that, we want to start using subdivisions. And with this right now, because I've put too much detail in there, whenever I remesh, you can see it just kind of destroys all of the effort I've put in already. So let's just fix some of this this mass here. I think get a little more meaner. I think the cheeks. I like that the cheeks kind of droop down this way, a little bit more like a cat. Oh, sorry, more like a how cats usually. This one's more more upside down triangle kind of thing, and I want to maintain that semi-cuteness that you have from the pug. So for the sake of not making you sit here and watch me do the same thing over and over and balancing the model's proportions back and forth, I'm just going to skip the video ahead to an area which is a lot more informative. Let's just jump around. I'm going to jump back on this one. I'm going to probably give it a little bit more resolution first before I end up subdividing this. And now I'm just gonna switch to the clay brush again. I'm just gonna start sculpting, flow of things. just gonna isolate this thing so it's like I believe it's this solo one here. Yes, you hit solo on the side, which I've assigned a hotkey to. It will hide everything except for the subtool that you have currently selected. It just makes it easier to do things based on what you want to do. I'd like to take the time to just kind of tell you that there's no right or wrong way of doing things, so whatever I've told you is really just sharing my own workflow. This has worked for me, and it's been a very comfortable workflow, and I've been able to pretty much create whatever I want to create using these methods. So just take everything with a grain of salt. Pick and choose what workflow works best for you, and just know your ins and outs. And that's very, very important when you're becoming a 3D artist or professional in this industry as a whole. The really nice thing is I like to usually use like the standard brush, and it really helps accentuate those shapes on the very edges. It gives it like that extra bony kind of feel once you go over like certain areas, because it's like very sharp on how it adds to the overall surface. So I kind of just repeat this process again, and it's pretty much the same thing for a little while. So I'm just going to skip ahead again and bring you to the next stage. Alright, let's close down the mesh, and I'll just Control D'd it to go. That's basically I added a subdivision. So if I Control Z, what I did is just hit divide. That's what gave me it. Now with this, I just want to actually I'm at a point where I want to use maybe like clay build-up or clay polish. Let's see what the effects of clay polish is like. It's too subtle. I'm not really feeling. I want something with a little more texture, so clay build-up would be good. Yeah. So I generally like leaving in my brush strokes if I can, because I find like it's a lot more interesting than something that's just smooth. So this stage is what I would consider the micro stage, which I was talking about earlier. This is where I'm now no longer thinking about my medium forms and my large forms, but I'm thinking strictly about surface detail and texture. So in this case, since I'm only doing a sculpt, I'm doing it this way because this is my preference. There are loads of ways to essentially sculpt the surface of your details. You could do it with Noisemaker, but in this case, I do it this way because it's my own preference. You can see I'm kind of like sculpting sideways, almost like just helping define those little like curves and crevices. This is generally how I sculpt. I've done it a few times today already, but it's a very solid way of sculpting, and I go back and forth using Z add and sub using the Alt key. I find that I'm quite obsessed with the bony kind of look to things, so I would say that this technique I'm using right now is actually a very good way to kind of achieve that texture if you're ever interested. But it is really about just sculpting with the grain and with the form of the bone itself. You can see, this is, it's just adding and subtracting these forms. When it gets too low, I start adding stuff back in and start removing it. It's just good. And the more subdivisions you go in, the more defined this gets. So with the same technique that I've been doing, I'm just going to apply the same procedure to other parts of the sculpt and just fast forward this a little bit more. So I've applied the same procedure to the other subtools so far, and now I've kind of made my way back to detailing the face. So in the process of this, I kind of realized that I wasn't very happy with how the wrinkles have turned out. So I'm just going to start making adjustments to it and just see where we go with it. So what I want to do is I want to go to my Damien standard, and I want to load a custom alpha brush that I made myself. So if you have Damien standard selected and then go to brush alpha and just go import, I have included a alpha in the tutorial package itself. So just load that, and then what you get is just, first I want to turn up the stroke on this as well. So if you go to stroke, lazy mouse, put the radius up to something about like 30. Just want to have this nice, smoother kind of like a crease, like a crease brush almost. I just want to use that to kind of sort this out a bit, because right now everything feels a bit out. So first of all, I'm just gonna start moving stuff around again. And just like, I might have to actually smooth stuff down as well. So I might go back down to the low levels. Just smooth it out. Let's go back up one level. Now with the Damien standard brush, let's look at our reference. And I think like initially I want something really crinkled like this. I think we could still do something like that, but I think I didn't really put enough effort into it and it didn't turn out the way I wanted. So I'm just gonna try and tackle that again with a mix of things. But let's see how we go. So first of all, let's think about this. I kind of feel like I want this part there. So it kind of dips in like that almost. Let's go down a subdivision. Something like that. It's necessary to sculpt on different divisions because on the lower ones you'll get much nicer, bigger kind of like shapes, and then when you get into like the more detailed, more high subdivision areas, you can get like the micro detail. But the most important thing is always on the lowest subdivision. You want to make sure that those read clearly. Like some of this stuff, like I feel like it's smooth this in and redo. And one thing I generally don't really like is when everything's too even. Like these two are like the same thickness, like all three of these are about the same thickness, and I feel like something about that just looks weird sometimes. So I'm just gonna smooth that out and try that again. I think under the pressure of doing these kind of videos, sometimes you kind of forget about things until you have like a little bit of time to look at it again. So one thing I kind of want to at least like demonstrate is that even if you've been working for a long time in this industry and you've been an artist for a long time, you're going to make mistakes. So in this case, like I kind of want to make sure that I could include the fact that I worked on something and I thought it looked good at the time, but you take your eyes off a moment and you come back to it and you realize, with fresh eyes, it doesn't actually look that good. So you're going to always want to, at least at some point, go back and change things because your overall view on the model that you've been working on might have changed. Like maybe it just isn't the way that you wanted it to be. But in all honesty, it's just that no one really gets it right the first time. So right now I'm just checking in both perspectives, orthographic and perspective mode. And as you can see in orthographic, it looks kind of fat and flat in general. That's because of the field of view. So make sure you're checking in both versions of it, because depending on the game, obviously perspective's gonna have a different effect based on the way it looks. So now I'm just gonna fast forward the video a bit. Later on down this video, I basically realized that the tusks just aren't really working for me anymore. So I start to kind of take a step back from the walrus idea. So you can actually see me struggling to kind of shape that upper jaw a bit. And that was when I kind of realized it wasn't really working out. And I tried to turn the tusks into something else, which eventually works into a much better positioning than what I had it originally. I might. And let's just delete the upper half here. It's Control Shift to select rect, and then I hold Alt to deselect. And then I'm just going to delete hidden, which again is in geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. Let's just smooth this out. I'll just turn this into some kind of weird whiskered beard thing. I just want to say again about how powerful Dynamesh is in a workflow like this, because it basically lets you really pull and push a mesh so far and then lets you just rebuild it like from scratch, and it makes it such an easy and clean pipeline. So this has been a really good way of just knocking out quick shapes and stuff. So definitely make it a huge part of your workflow. But just remember, whenever you get your base shapes down and everything's generally there, you still need to go into something like subdivisions, because you won't get that high quality detail unless you go into subdivisions afterwards. So I'm going to fast forward the video again. I know I've been skipping and speeding things up quite a bit in this part of the tutorial, but honestly, there's not really much you're missing, but I also don't want to go so far ahead that I just go from like having nothing to a completely finished model. So a lot of this is just repetition and just going through it over and over again. So up until now, I've pretty much been sculpting on Dynamesh on the main base. So what I've come up to at this point is I've deactivated Dynamesh and now subdivided my mesh. So at this point, I'm just detailing, and honestly, I didn't spend as much time as I usually would on doing this, but you could usually spend as much time as you want. I would say that the detailing phase is just as important as the blockout phase, but it takes just as much time, so probably even longer. But there are fast ways of doing things, but it's all down to your personal preference. In this case, I'm hand sculpting pretty much the entire model with a little bit of help from a noisemaker. And I'm thinking, like, generally this thing's missing a little bit of character in terms of, like, I guess, like, it's just like, you know, a wrinkly face. I almost want to add, like, I don't know, maybe even, like, stuff here. It makes it a little less normal looking. Like, this kind of stuff would be cool, you know? Maybe in freeze, like, even numbers are a bit boring. Oop. Yeah, that might be nice, you know? It's just dealing with these creases here. Very, very little. Just a little bit of a raise there. Always use your standard brush to, you know, just like build up some of the depth in these things. Standard and inflate are honestly do what wonders for these things. Some stuff like here, oh, that was too much for sure. Same down here. Again, I kind of want these things, like these creases, to fold in on itself. Really gives the idea of like tighter and like meatier kind of anatomy. I'm just gonna subdivide this one more time now. Now we've got into like the higher things. So now like detail in general is generally much more crisp, like much more crisp. So it's like looking to, I guess, like the more macro detail side of things, like much finer stuff. I'm gonna add like a secondary layer of wrinkles, for example. I want on a low intensity. Like this kind of stuff. It's a bit too weak there, but Again, just make sure to always smooth out after you sculpt and then re-sculpt it. You don't have to do that all the time, but that's generally how I go about things a lot of the time. Remember, standard brush helps a lot. So I'm just going to move the video along a bit, deeper into the detailing parts. I don't want to skip too much so you don't see what I do, but I also want to skip a bunch of stuff that may be just a bit too long for you to just sit there and watch. Yeah, something like this. Now usually I push everything to this kind of sculpting texture. For the sake of just having variety in this, I'm going to leave it this way. But most of my sculpts usually have, I like to leave my brush strokes in. And that usually just be like, this clay build-up tool. And, same thing, I would just like sculpt around it like that. Sculpting the forms that I have earlier. And I'll smooth it out, For this one, I'm gonna do a little bit of it for the sake of texture, because I'm not a big fan of like the overly smooth kind of look. Let's think about that lip again. I kind of want that walrus lip. It's a bit bland. Get anything from the texture of this. I did have a bunch of these things because I thought this would be kind of cool for some texture on the sculpt. It's a bit much and a bit too noisy. I almost want to add this to the chin. I mean, we could. I could show you how we do it, but I'm not sure how it will look. I think it might be okay with a little bit, maybe. Like, something like almost like this much. Nah. It was worth a small idea, but it's starting to already look noisy to me, so I don't really want it. I guess we'll just keep it bland for now. Yeah, I'll just give it a detail pass. Okay, let's continue these creases. Bump up this a bit. Just really start thinking about how this joins in. So I want a bit of creasing around the edges here. Just remember, standard is your friend, and it will help you really bring out your creases. And hopefully we'll finish the job. So that's moving. Bring this intensity down. Let's keep doing this. I don't know, it just feels like I'm decorating a cake almost. It's just adding the little bits in there that you want. It's fun. So for the high detail process, or what we would call the micro detail process, there are several ways you can go about this. In this case, what I'm doing is probably the longest and most tedious way of going about it, which in my situation is because I love to sculpt. I don't mind doing some things. It's kind of more of a therapeutic thing for me. But if you were to go about other ways, you could go about using alphas, where you would load an alpha texture into your brush, and you can basically use that to drag and drop or sculpt across your model, so that way it kind of covers the surface without having to go through every pore and everything, because honestly it is like a really long process if you plan on doing all of the pores and stuff by hand. But in my case, because I'm going through a sculpted look, I don't really need that much surface detail in terms of like the micro detail level of it all. Which brings me to the point that for the sake of this tutorial, because I wanted a sculpted look and I was obtaining that through just rawly sculpting anyway, when it came to my surface details, I just decided to use Noisemaker instead, which is a stock feature within Zbrush. And I will show you how I did that now. So to finish this off, I'm just gonna go to the Surface tab, and you click Noise. So in here, you could basically select a noise that goes across the entire surface of the selected subtool. So if you click on Noise Plug, you'll see that there's a whole selection of different noises. I honestly just fly through them and see what looks best. In this case, I think erosion. And I'm just gonna adjust the mix basic noise, which if you put to 0, it uses the noise plug, and if you push it to the other side, it uses more of the generic white noise that comes with the Noisemaker. And strength kind of just speaks for itself. And then the noise scale and the plugin scale, they basically drive the two different types of noises running alongside each other, as you can see. So erosion wasn't really what I was feeling, so I'm just going to dig for another noise to run across this. So maybe Voronoi might be a better choice. Let's play around with this, adjust the strength. No, not Voronoi. Let's try Spiral. No, not Spiral. Zigzag, Wood, Weave. There are a lot of different noises you can play with. I'm just gonna have a look at Turbulence. This looks kind of nice. I do like that look. It's got a sculpty kind of feel to it. Just gonna keep playing with this a bit more. Yeah, so this is a curve. It will just kind of accentuate the noise itself. It will like push it more towards black or white, so you can just play around with it. I think this looks okay. You could try Mask by Noise, which will mask the entire sculpture by noise, and then you could do stuff with it. But I think I might just apply it to the mesh instead. Yeah, I think this looks good. Yeah, so there you go. I'm going to call this done for the time being, and I think this demonstrates what the Noisemaker basically does. So I guess the only thing left to do is pretty much just clean up. I think what I want to do is I want to just cut up these edges on the bottom half, because it's really lumpy at the moment, and I think it's important to like clean up and leave it slightly presentable once you're done with your sculpt. So in this case, I'm going to use the clip curve brush, which you can pretty much find if you hold Control and Shift and you replace the selection lasso or selection marquees tool with the clip curve. If you hold Control Shift and just drag onto your mesh, it will pretty much drag everything from the dark side of the line to wherever the line is. And we're just going to go about using that to clean this up. Also, while you've got Control and Shift held down and you're in mid-drag on the clip curve brush, you can actually hold spacebar to move it around, so you can move it into position if you didn't get it right the first time. So I'm going to call it there, and I want to thank you for watching this tutorial. I really hope I've helped you better understand sculpting in more of a traditional sense, and at least with the design side aspect to it all, I hope that you've been able to take some positive things away from it and help you, I guess, think a little bit differently on your approach when using reference images. Again, this is a very fine art based approach, so it is different from what I would usually advise artists, but I would say doing something abstract and something purely based off creativity that's not restrained by logic can be a very fun and refreshing thing to do from time to time. And again, I think it's like the best way to let yourself just have free reign on learning how to get better at sculpting, since there's so many organic forms that you just play around with. And that being said, I thank you for your time, and I will catch you next time.